the number one question, and I think the question that is going to define, honestly, the Celtics season as a whole, whether it's a success, whether it's a failure, good season, bad season, no matter where they end, is going to be where does Jayson Tatum rank among the NBA's elite? And as kind of a follow-up question to that, where does he need to rank for the Celtics to be a successful basketball team this season? Grenham, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, kind of interesting. So I'm looking right now at the Washington Post. Ben Golliver did SI's top 100 list for a long time, and now he's over at the Washington Post. So entering last season, he had Tatum 12th, which I think was pretty fair. I think that's probably about right. And I think now he's
I would say that's fair, even to the point of being a little bit optimistic going into last season. Like that's a rosy view of Jayson Tatum going into last season.
100%. Totally agree. And I think now the question becomes, is he inside that top 10? I think he's right on the cusp right there. I think we've talked so much about the potential lack of offensive punch with this team, and Tatum's obviously going to lead that charge. So the question is, if he is that top 10 guy, like they're going to be in much better shape than they are currently. That's a very obvious thing. But if I'm looking at these top 10 to 15 guys in the league, I think Tatum is right around 10 or 11 for me. I think it's tough because you're looking at guys like Jokic, Giannis, Luka, KD, Harden, Steph Curry. I mean, LeBron's up there. I think Embiid probably made a pretty good jump after what we saw from him last year. I mean, obviously there's durability problems there, but skill-wise, he is definitely right up there for me. So I think in terms of, ranking him among the NBA's top 10, top 15 guys, I think Tatum is right around, I would probably say 10 or 11. I could list them out, but I would guess right around 10 or 11 right now. And I think that's fair. I think that's where the Celtics need him to be. I think if the Celtics do want to take a step up from some of their expectations, moving up into that 10, 9, I don't know about 8 section, but making a little jump in there is probably important.
Yeah, I think I largely agree. The biggest question I have is what the Celtics are genuinely, like in their heart of hearts, expecting this season. Mm-hmm. Because if what they are expecting is an okay season where they're relatively competitive and maybe they, in a best case scenario, they sneak up to the 5 seed, maybe they, kind of roust out one of that, like, Miami or Philly has a down season, if that's their goal to get up to there but like, they're not really hoping to be contenders this season, then I think, yeah, if Jayson Tatum is the 10th best player, if he's the 11th best player, the 9th best player, that's completely fine. No problem. And realistically, I agree with you. I think that's largely where he is. I think there's some guys who are in the top 10 who I could see him passing this season. I'm not sure, Steph Curry's getting a little bit older. I think Steph is one of the greatest basketball players we've ever seen. So if Steph Curry is Steph Curry, then I don't see any way that Jayson Tatum surpasses him. But if there is any slippage there, maybe, especially given the fact that Tatum plays pretty good defense as well, the fact that he's a two-way guy, that matters a lot. And I would say the same thing with Dame Lillard, right? Where I think Dame is a top 10 player, and we will see what version of Dame we get this season. He has shown no signs of slowing down at all. And I think with the Nets guys, it's kind of interesting because I certainly think that Harden is one of the greatest players in the NBA, but is he going, and I mean, last season he showed that if he's the distributor on that team, then yeah, that's pretty tough. But, I mean, how much does that impact his production? Does his production impact his ranking, like where he is? I think all of those things could come into play. To me, I think for the Celtics to sort of raise themselves out of the tier, we did our tiers of the Eastern Conference a couple of weeks ago. So for the Celtics to raise themselves out of the tier of like pretty good, like good playoff team into that faux contender tier, I think Tatum needs to be better than somebody like Kawhi. I think he needs to be a little bit better than somebody like Embiid. And that is a tall order. Maybe not Embiid, because I think last year Embiid elevated himself to like, maybe he was one of the 3-4 best players in the NBA last year. But, I think Tatum needs to get himself to like that 5, 6, 7 range if the Celtics are going to be faux contenders this year. And that is a really tall task. It's not necessarily a fair ask for him, but I think if that is the Celtics' expectation, if that is their goal, that's where he needs to get. And we'll see if it happens. I don't think the Celtics need him to get there to be contenders in the next 3 or 4 years, assuming they bring somebody else in. But if this current core as constructed is going to get to that level, that's where I think he needs to be.
Yeah, I agree with the Kawhi jumping note because Kawhi is one of those guys, super talented, similar to Tatum, has that really good two-way, prototype setup, but the consistency isn't always there and the passiveness is definitely there. And sometimes we've seen that with Tatum where he hasn't always been the aggressor. And he went through stretches last year where he would go 30 plus for a couple games in a row. Yeah. And then he'd go, 14, 15, a couple, and then you go back to 40, and then you'd come back with 18 or something like that. And this year's team, I think even more so than last year's team, they can't win games when Tatum is scoring 15 points. Sure, you can get a hot night from Marcus Smart. You can get a hot night from Peyton Pritchard, anyone, but you're not going to rely on that. That's not a winning formula by any means. So you're 100% right in the sense that he's got to jump Kawhi and those consistency categories in the more aggressive category because he's the guy. And he was the guy last year, and he was good with that in the playing game. You saw it down the stretch. He was putting up some ridiculous numbers, but he has to be that guy. I think in terms of bigger picture here, something that popped into my mind when you're talking about Embiid and some of the other top 10 guys, he's the youngest guy in this category outside of Luka, right? So you're looking at these top 10, 15 guys. They're in great shape long-term. So, I think we're both very much on the same page where the Celtics, when it comes to Tatum, are in a very rosy spot because he's already pushing into this potential top 10 category where he's younger than all of them except for Luka, and he has the two-way potential, which a lot of these guys don't have, to the level that he does. I think Tatum's scoring is so incredible sometimes that his defensive side of the ball gets overlooked. He's a really smart defender. He's got really good size. And he moves really well. So I think the two-way potential is really, really huge, but I definitely agree with kind of having to jump a few of those, back into the top 10 guys. And a lot of that comes with consistency in my mind.